Hi, Internet. My name is Helen Knudsen, and I'm so grateful to Ryan and to Scenic City Shakespeare for inviting me to talk about Shakespeare's words today. Before I forget, please donate and donate to support more remote theater. You can do that by visiting sceniccityshakespeare.org/donate, or you can give through Venmo or Cash App with the handle @Scenic Shakespeare. So I'm a Chicago actor, and I've been involved with Scenic City Shakespeare's remote theater productions as both an actor and a verse nurse, which is just a cuter way of saying a text coach. Like, why would you say text coach if you could rhyme and say verse nurse? But a verse nurse is responsible for providing the pronunciation details, definitions, and any comprehension question notes for actors. So I've always had a curiosity about Shakespeare. And when I began to heavily study it, shout out to Shakespeare and Company, Susan Hart, and Jeffrey Carlson, all of my most wonderful teachers, I realized just how unfathomably beautiful and clever the text is. The practice and the research that goes into understanding and communicating a Shakespearean monologue is just the nerdiest, trickiest, and above all, the most rewarding work. And then multiply all of that by 1,000 when you look at the full text of a play. So discovering the secrets of the bard's genius is so rewarding, and the process just never gets old. It just gets deeper. So today I will be breaking down a monologue from the Scottish play, or because I'm not superstitious and I'm also not in a theater, I will be calling it Macbeth. It's got some Halloween vibes with the three witches. So I'll be approaching the monologue, the Unsex Me Here, Lady M monologue, from the actor's point of view. So let's take a look. Fancy camera angle, fancy homemade camera angle. This is the text from Lady M's Act 1, Scene 5 speech. So I'm going to keep talking before we dive into this monologue, but feel free to look at it, give it a skim over. This is Lady Macbeth in Act 1, Scene 5. It is her first appearance in the play, and she has just received a letter from her husband, Macbeth, recounting the Weird Sister's prophecy that he will be king. So this is a new thing in Scotland at the time when this play is written about. So to be a king in Scotland, when the king died or told everyone who his successor would be, it wasn't always his son. It wasn't always hereditary. So often the soldier that was most accomplished would be the next king, or the king that conquered the king would be the next king. But because this is a play that was written right when King James was coming into power in England, he was King James in Scotland and then united the kingdoms. Shakespeare wrote Macbeth at a time where we are supporting the line of succession, kings to sons. So in Scotland, he decided, with this play, the whole catalyst for everything that happens is that Duncan the king decides to pass his throne down to his son, instead of who might naturally have it would be Macbeth or someone of his stature as well. So when the Weird Sisters are approached by Macbeth and Banquo, they give him a prophecy that he will be king. They give him a threefold prophecy. What we're looking at right now is the prophecy that he will be king. And he writes to his wife, who is his confidant. He writes to her and says, this is crazy. I'm going to be king, apparently. I can't wait to come home. And so this is Lady Macbeth receiving that letter. She's just received it. And she knows that the only way for Macbeth to become king is for the king to die as well as his sons. and for Macbeth, who is an accomplished soldier, to step up to the throne. Lady M is her husband's #1 supporter who has huge ambition for him. She knows that Macbeth would never attempt regicide on his own, let alone come up with the plot to do so. So right before this monologue, a messenger conveniently has just arrived to tell Lady M that the king himself and his sons will be spending the night at her home and that Macbeth is on his way home. Let's see what happens with that information that she now has. Seems like a perfect time to attempt regicide. So you will have noticed already with this text, if you've been glancing at it, some of these words look a bit funny. The text that I'm using right here comes from the First Folio, which is the collected works of Shakespeare printed in 1623, 7 years after his death. His colleagues, John Hemmings and Henry Condell, scrounged up all of Shakespeare's works that they could find, put them in one big book. Because there were no copyright laws, they had to, figure out which plays were real, which ones were just written by critics that were trying to remember the plays. But they got the help of the actors in some of the plays who still had their old scripts. They scrounged everything together to create the canon that we know today. First of all, you'll probably have noticed that this is not written in a modern English script. This is because standardized English in the late 1500s was non-existent. There was no dictionary to look up spelling. There were no grammar rules to follow. In fact, people were using, when they were writing, they were using Latin grammar rules, which kind of mean you can put words in whatever order you want. So that's why sometimes the grammar looks a bit funky. England was on the cusp of oral culture, so everything was written phonetically or how it would have been said. From a quote from Hamlet's address to the players in Hamlet, we can assume that Shakespeare wrote his lines as a blueprint of how he wanted them to be said. I think that is such an important thing to note, is that just because the text looks weird doesn't mean that it doesn't have a meaning of why it's written that way. I think we should trust Shakespeare in that he had a reason and that his genius should be trusted. So what Hamlet says is, "Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it, as many of your players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines." Hamlet goes on to tell the hired actors exactly how to read the play that he's written. So the First Folio, I bring this up because it is so easily available for free online to look at. It's also sold facsimile style, as you can see in this giant book behind me. So when we have a document available that has been preserved from Shakespeare's own time, we have no reason not to pick up every single clue he lays out for us. All of his irregularities in the text are directions for the actor. To communicate with the audience, we need to know Shakespeare's intentions before we adjust to the modern ear and communicate with the audience. I just think the First Folio is such an invaluable resource, and it's like having Shakespeare just whispering his directions to you in your ear when you're performing it. So I'm going to put another piece of paper on top of this one to just give you a very brief description of the poetry, or a little bit of background on the poetry before we start dissecting the text, because Shakespeare is really intimidating sometimes. So I want to make this monologue in particular digestible and show you that it's not as hard as it looks to understand Shakespeare. So Shakespeare inherited a style of writing that was very popular in the 1500s called iambic pentameter. Everyone was using it. It has the beat of a heartbeat, da-dun, 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 da-dun. And it feels very natural. Shakespeare, like Mozart, he played with variations on the rules. He broke some rules. So don't be surprised if there are some hiccups in the lines or some extra syllables that you don't know what to do with. That's likely Shakespeare keeping you on your toes. So iambic pentameter right here simply means, so penta means 5. Obviously meter is the beats, so the type of poetry. The iamb is a foot of poetry like that. So that what that means is unstressed, stressed. And that creates 1 foot or 1 beat that we now have 5 of. So, for example, a perfect line of iambic pentameter right here is from Richard II. I wasted time, and now doth time waste me. So this is just a brief introduction to scansion. There's crazier stuff on Shakespeare, but trust me that there are plenty of books if you really want to get your scansion nerdy brain going. I'm just laying out the basics so that we're all on the same page. So if we were to scan this line and write out the beats of poetry, we would go, I wasted time, and now doth time waste me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pretty straightforward. This is what we would call, let's see, where can I write it where you will see it on the screen? This is called a perfect 10. It's also called a masculine ending, where it's a strong beat ending it, but Shakespeare doesn't need to be gendered, so I'm just going to call it a perfect 10. Now this next line, very famous line, to be or not to be, that is the question. This starts off as a 10, to be or not to be, that is the question. So we've got a little bit of a hiccup at the end. This is a pretty common variant on iambic pentameter, sometimes known as the feminine ending, but I call it an 11 because there are 11 little slashes, 11 syllables that we are pronouncing. So on this last line, which is much less common, this is actually a 12. So this is where it turns into iambic hexameter, or when it appears in Shakespeare, we often call it, when it appears in a form of iambic pentameter, we call it the Alexandrine because it is 12. This does not appear in the Lady M speech that I'm dissecting today, but fun little tidbit. So this is, unless I spake or looked or touched or carved to thee. Whoa, 12 syllables. So there's my clock chiming in to agree with me. So 12s aren't used as often. It's a way to be persistent on something, or to have a run-on sentence, or to really send home a point. I'll write it down here, Alexandrine. That's what it's formally called. So now that we have a little bit of a basis of iambic pentameter, we're going to look at a much more advanced speech. Here it is. You already got a glimpse of it. So today, I know that we haven't gone through, every form of poetic scansion that we could, but for today, trust me that I've done the scansion research, and that whenever there is a dramatic hiccup, there is a reason behind it. There's plenty of resources that I'll give you at the end. There's plenty of books that I would love to recommend. Or if you have a question on something, just drop it in the comments, and I'll try to get to it at the end. So we're looking for iambic pentameter and the occasional dramatic hiccup. So let us exercise our imagination and curiosity, and let's keep our eyes peeled for colorful verbs, interesting word choice, repetition, metaphors, alliteration, and imagery. Sounds like a lot, but we're going to take it slow and go line by line. So here we are, first line. I have written how many syllables, what kind of line it is on the side. I love doing it this way because it means that when I connect all of the lines here, it kind of looks like a heartbeat of a character, or like a heart rate monitor. And it kind of tells you where there's a hiccup or a dramatic, a dramatic error, where their blood pressure goes up a tiny bit. I find it really cool just to see that visual of it. But anyway, to begin this speech, we actually start on half a line. We won't go through this entire speech scansion. We won't scan this entire piece, I should say, but let's just do the first 2 lines together. So the first line is actually a half line of sharing the line before. This is the line before, if you can see it up here. Give him tending, he brings great news. But we're starting the monologue at the raven himself is hoarse. I give you that just because it shows that it is in fact a perfect 10. So let's go. The raven himself is horse. Raven, we are smushing together Ray and Ven into raven. We're just throwing away the second half of it, smushing it all together to fit into a perfect 10, which is the strongest type of verse line. So a raven, here's where we get some definitions. A raven is an omen of death, but it is also the descriptor that the messenger has said about another messenger. So earlier, right before this speech, the messenger, this is the messenger, says, one of my fellows had the speed of him who almost dead for breath had scarcely more than would make up his message. That's the raven, a bird. The raven being an omen of death, that also means that Lady M has been hearing all of these bad things that might be happening. And so she feels like there's so many death omens that have been calling out to her. What with the letter, all of Macbeth's recount of the weird sisters, the death omen could not be more hoarse. So the raven himself is hoarse, that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan. This is another weird hiccup. That croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan. We would never say that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan. That just doesn't sound right. We want to say Duncan. So that's why we have this triple syllabation. I don't know if that's a word. We have 3 syllables in entrance. So that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan. Why is it fatal? Oh, because of regicide, probably, this forming plot. Lady M is thinking on her feet, this is the only way. And I want to also remind you that characters in Shakespeare are in unreasonable circumstances. So why on earth would we ever expect them to be reasonable, to act reasonably or level-headed? There's no reason that they should be acting that way, because the times and the circumstances they are living in are not reasonable at all. So of course she's jumping straight to regicide. That croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan. Okay, she's already making up her mind with fatal. Under my battlements. Okay, not home. She's choosing the word battlements. That's odd. Now, this speech is only 4 sentences long. Would you believe it? That was our first sentence right here. Now we begin the incantation. I firmly believe that Lady M is not the mustache twirling evil villain that we see, because why would she have to call on evil spirits to harden her heart to do the deed? I think she is such a cowardly, scared woman that she needs evil forces to interfere in order to do a bad thing, to even contemplate murder. So this is where we begin this triple incantation, just like the witches had a triple incantation. So here's our first one. I've highlighted all 3 of the comes so you can see it. Our first one, come you spirits. So we're thinking bad impish spirits here, that tend or wait on mortal thoughts, so human thoughts. So we want the spirits that are bad and listen to humans. Unsex me here. Now there are 2 ways that you can think of this line. Unsex, as in take away all femininity, take away all womanly changeability, all softness, all love. Take away everything womanly about me to make it so that I can do things like a man. However, I prefer the idea that to unsex someone is to take away everything that makes them human. I think that's more interesting. So she is saying, take away all of my humanness so that I can attempt a murder, or that I can tell my husband to attempt a murder. I think that's a little bit more interesting than just, oh, I'm a woman, make me into a man. So unsex me here and fill me from the crown. Interesting, she's still talking like a royal. She could have said head, but she says crown. Fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood. So in the 15 and 1600s, thin blood is what you want. That allows the humors and the spirits to go through your blood, and you're healthy if you have thin blood. It was believed that if you had thick blood, then your humors couldn't escape, and you would have poisoned blood. So make thick my blood, stop up the excess. So make it so thick that I will not even have passageway excess and the passage to remorse. That no compunctious, meaning remorseful, compunctious visitings of nature, so natural good, shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and it. So she's saying, make my blood so thick, fill me with cruelty, that no remorseful visits of humankind or human nature, so that my human nature will not shake me from this ruthless deed that I'm pursuing, but also don't make me feel like the fulfillment and the intention are the same. I want to fulfill the intention that I have. Don't come between me and what I'm about to do. Now we go on to incantation number 2. Come to my woman's breasts and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers. Now, there is a theory that is supported by the text, that Lady M was never able to have children, or had a baby, but it was either stillborn or died very early. So there is a theory that this line specifically is talking about how her milk for gall, maybe she had the baby and she still had breast milk and the baby wasn't able to drink it, so it turned to poison. Or here's an interesting imagery for it. Come, talking to the spirits, these little devilish imps, come to my woman's breasts and take my milk for gall, drink the poison that I have for you, suckle the poison, you murdering ministers. So now she's really saying the word murdering. Ministers meaning the servants or the spirits. Wherever in your sightless substances, so they're invisible, but they're definitely there. Wherever in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief. So you accompany nature's mischief. And now incantation 3, come thick night. And I love this last one. Come thick night. So really dark, impenetrable night, but also the idea of thick as thieves, the plot is thick. And pall thee in the dunnest smoke of hell. So pall meaning wrap, and dun or dunnest meaning the murkiest. So we want a thick night wrapped in the murkiest smoke of hell, that my keen knife, we've got 2 N's there, that's just interesting, keen knife, see not, another N, not the wound it makes. So keen meaning sharp, but also eager. So the knife that is excited to kill a king. My keen knife see not the wound it makes. So let the night be so dark that I can't even see myself murder someone, or that eventually my husband can't see himself murder someone. Nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark. So again, we're thinking of this thick night like a blanket. To cry, hold, hold, to cry, stop. Let not heaven see what I'm doing and tell me to stop. At that point, she's cut off because Macbeth comes in. So we can only wonder what she would say next. I also love this last sentence because it bears a very strong resemblance to the scene before when Macbeth is contemplating what he could do to get rid of Duncan the king. He doesn't know what he can do. He just knows that there's a prophecy and that the only way that the prophecy could come true would be if Duncan dies and his sons die. So Macbeth in Act 1, Scene 4 says, "For in my way it lies. Stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires. The eye wink at the hand, yet let that be which the eye fears when it is done to see." Very similar to Come Thick Night, like make it so dark no one can see, and also make it so dark that I am not on the hook anymore. I want my soul to still go to heaven. So if heaven doesn't see, then it's not me. So she's both trying to convince herself of a murder plot, but also convince herself that she's off the hook for it if it happens, because she's calling on spirits to make it happen, and they're making her hard and able to murder. It's incredible the way that she's able to create a murder plot. So the way that we can trust that Shakespeare had a reason for his word choice, like battlements and the raven, the crown to the toe, fatal entrance, is so important. And I think it's just so much more interesting to trust his word choice and then make it attainable for the common ear today. The more that we can see the imagery in it, the more that we can understand what Shakespeare is telling us to say, the more that we can communicate with the audience and therefore invite the audience to join the story with us. So I would love to just give you a quick reading of this once my clock shuts up. And I'll give you a reading of this as an actor. Now that you know all of the definitions and the interesting language that is used here, I hope you can be drawn in a little bit and feel not so nervous about looking at Shakespeare if you were nervous before. So I'm going to Ryan, do you want me to turn off my camera or keep it on? The extra camera. Okay. So I'm just going to give you guys a reading of this monologue, and then I'll give you some book recommendations and we'll be cool. So remember, she's just gotten the word that Duncan is here. She's just gotten her letter. She's read the letter. And the messenger is bringing what she hears as omens of death. The raven himself is hoarse, that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. Come, you spirits, that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood. Stop up the excess and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and it. Come to my woman's breasts and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers, wherever in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief. Come, thick night, and pall thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold. Great Glons, worthy Cawdor, greater than both by the all hail hereafter. Thy letters have transported me beyond this ignorant present, and I feel now the future in the instant. So I tagged on that little last sentence that she says once Macbeth actually walks in through the door. She has her thoughts cut off. But I hope you learned something today. I hope you find Shakespeare a little bit less intimidating if you did before. Thank you so much for tuning in and for taking an interest in Scenic City Shakespeare. If there's any questions, I'll be in the comments. Catch me tonight, actually, in the global premiere of Ian Dusher's new adaptation of Frankenstein. Very spooky for Halloween. It's being streamed on the Scenic City Shakespeare's Facebook page, so check it out. Remember to donate if you can, and keep supporting the arts. Do I have time to recommend some books, Ryan, or is this goodbye? Oh, that's okay. So when approaching a Shakespeare text, I'm just going to give you the rundown of the books that I immediately reach for. When I'm looking at a specific play, if this is interesting to anyone as nerdy as I am, I always go for the Arden third edition. This is the Macbeth one. I really like the third edition because the cover is beautiful, but it's also a great resource with a lot of footnotes of any changes from the folio text, any text history. There's great introduction material as well. So that's what I like if I'm getting a one-off play. The Holy Grail book, in my opinion, for actors, for readers, for anyone wanting to do more Shakespeare, is Barry Edelstein's Thinking Shakespeare. It is an invaluable resource. Oh my goodness. It's great for just looking at a lot of what we did today, more detailed stuff about scansion, detailed definitions, how to approach your text again. It also has a great resource of scholastic material in the back if you are interested in that side of things. So that's a great actor's guide. For my verse nursing work, I always reach for All the Words on Stage. It's this book. This is all Shakespeare's pronunciations. And it's not a dictionary by any means, it's just pronunciation dictionary. So it'll tell you if words are pronounced differently than in standardized English today, or if they scan differently in different texts. As for looking at a text to begin with, this book you can get for under $5 on Amazon. It's wonderful. It's called A to Z Shakespeare, or Shakespeare A to Z. This is great for any beginners to Shakespeare. It just gives you a synopsis scene by scene of each play. It gives you more digestible introduction and text history material and detailed character description. So it's great if you're reading a play for the first time to just have that sitting next to you to read along. And for definitions, this is these two books are traditional to use. The Shakespeare Lexicon and Quotation Dictionary, however, they're quite intimidating. Full of words, which is great because it gives you the definition of every single word in every single Shakespeare play, and if it changes based on the Shakespeare play and the text around it. But I more often reach for this one, Shakespeare's Words, because it gives you almost everything you need from the lexicons, just a little bit cleaner. And if you have any questions from Shakespeare's Words, you can just look at the lexicons to clear up those questions. But it also comes with character circles, which are particularly great to look at when you are reading the histories. Other than that, I mean, you can see some of my collection behind me of scholastic Shakespeare materials. Highly recommend Harold Bloom's Invention of the Human. That's a wonderful scholastic book about Shakespeare. Or if you're looking for history on specific plays, at the Asimov Shakespeare is also really wonderful. So now you've seen how much of a giant Shakespeare geek I am. Please remember to tune in to Frankenstein tonight. Support Scenic City Shakespeare. Again, you can donate on the Scenic City Shakespeare Patreon. You can go to sceniccityshakespeare.org/donate, or you can give through Venmo or Cash App with the handle @Scenic Shakespeare. So thank you so much for listening, everyone, and I'll see you tonight at Frankenstein.